Hello everyone, welcome to this new session of Reskill. My name is Dhaval Nagar. I am CEO of AppGambit. I'm also AWS Serverless Hero from India. And today we are going to talk about databases, specifically purpose-built database services that AWS offers. Overall, we are going to look at the challenges of running database outside the cloud environment. We are then going to look at the benefits of running database inside the cloud environment, different database services that AWS offers, how the billing works in case of cloud database, and the summary of everything. Now let's look at some of the challenges that we face when we basically set up and use the database outside the cloud environment. Starting from setting up the infrastructure, we need servers, we need machines, we need right storage to actually, depending on our usage and use case of the application. We need to actually set up the right networking so that all of our services can reach out to our database, and we need a right security. We do not want our database to be accessed by anyone from anywhere. Then comes selecting the right database. Now, a few years back, I would have said that the widely popular option was relational database, that is SQL based database. Nowadays we have many types of database, and we can select any one of those depending on the use case of our application. Next comes installation and maintenance. Now, over the professional career of mine, for many years, I haven't seen any database which actually provides kind of a one-step installation, and then there is low to no or minimum maintenance. There is always something. There are upgrades, version upgrades, there are security patches to be applied, there is some kind of cleanup needs to be done over the period of time. So all of these things is a repetitive task, and that's the reason why many companies, many popular kind of startups as well, they have either the team or the people who are well efficient with the databases if they are maintaining their own database. Maintaining the right version of the database. Now, you wouldn't set up, install a database at the start of your application and use the same version of the database over the period of the life of your application. You wouldn't use it the same for next few years. There is always some kind of a version upgrade that you need to do for a variety of reasons. Next is a data backup. Now, you want to make sure that all the data that you are saving in your database is kind of fully backed up. You can restore it in case of any disaster. You can restore it to actually do the experimentation in a separate environment. One or another way, you want to make sure that the data backup is always there. Now, the duration of the data backup and the freshness of the data backup, whether you want it up to last few seconds, few minutes, once in a day, once in a week, that all depends on the overall use case and the kind of infrastructure that you have. Next, and a very important part is security of not just your data, but security of the infrastructure itself. If you are setting up and manually maintaining your database, you want to make sure that no one else can reach to that database and start kind of using your data in an unexpected manner. The last one is monitoring. Now, this is an important piece, but a lot of times when you are actually setting up your database manually, you will kind of ignore this particular step at the start. You will say that this is something that you don't require to begin with. You can kind of take it up later on. You can make it up as and when required, kind of thing. But monitoring, similar to how the monitoring of the application is important, monitoring of the database is also very important. So these are some of the challenges. Like I said, this is not an extensive list. This list can grow and shrink depending on the use case of your application and where and how you are running it. Look at how some of these challenges can be mitigated with cloud databases. So in cloud databases, there are again two options. One is that we can, all the cloud, including the AWS, they provide the compute instance. So you can create your virtual machine and install the database. But that's not the database that we are going to talk about in this particular session. We're talking about the services that AWS provides as a database as a service. So some of the built-in features that all of these database service provides are, one is an ease of use. You can basically quickly start your database instance or a cluster and start using that in your cloud environment. Backup is almost instantaneously. It slightly depends on the database that you use, but there is kind of a different level, different configurations, different period of backup that you can take. Almost all the database that you use, the database storage engine is kind of fully durable. Encryption security is considered to be kind of a very primary requirement when we talk about the public cloud. AWS takes security very seriously, so there are tons of options through which we can enable the security, we can enable the encryption of the data irrespective of the database service that we are using. Replicas, as your application grows, you will require more power. You will need to extract more kind of a performance from your database, and one instance may not be kind of a suitable, and that's the kind of a promise of the cloud, right? You can instantly basically create or extend your environment to support the load. So replica is the similar thing. It allows your application to actually use the horizontal scaling of the database, and you can basically distribute the load accordingly. Security, as I mentioned, AWS takes security very high priority, and all the database services that we are going to look at, they actually employ the highest grade of security. Again, it requires a share, it follows the shared responsibility model. There are few things AWS does, and there are few things as a kind of a user of the cloud we need to do. Auto scaling and monitoring also comes by default. Many of the database services are kind of fully managed serverless, so scaling part is kind of built in, and monitoring is like all the other services that we AWS offers and we are using. The monitoring is also built in. We can immediately start seeing that what exactly is happening inside our database. Now I have actually taken out the pay-as-you-go from this built-in features. There are two billing model that the AWS database services follows. Some of the services are time-based, so you create kind of a database instance of relational database, let's say MySQL, or you create a cluster of the database of MySQL. Now the moment you do that, it will actually start incurring the cost. You have to pay based on the number of seconds that it is up and running, with a minimum kind of a time. In some case it is as minimum as 10 minutes. So if you start a database instance and in 5 minutes you stop it, you still need to pay for 10 minutes. But after that, it is kind of a minimum billing that you incur is a per second. Now this is whether you use the database or not, you still need to pay for it. This is a time based billing model. The second is a consumption based, which is a serverless, new category of the databases, in which the database is available, but if you are not interacting with the database, then you are actually not paying for any of the transaction or anything. Yes, if you have already used it and you have stored some data, you might incur the kind of a cost of the storage, but you are not consistently incurring the cost of running and keeping that database up and running. So these are the some of the benefits of running the database in the AWS cloud. Now we'll look at the different AWS database services that they offer. Go to the AWS databases. So this is a page. They have put all the different databases that they offer, different features that they offer, the services offer. So let's look at some of this. So this is the aws.amazon.com slash products slash databases. Here these are the features: purpose built. Choose from 15 plus purpose-built database engines, including relational, key value, document, in-memory, graph, time series, wide column, and ledger database. That's a very wide portfolio of databases that they support, and that's why it is called kind of a purpose-built databases. Performance at scale. Now these numbers may vary, but generally they put some kind of benchmarking from the open source or the standard version to how it runs inside the cloud. So all of these databases are performance grade, and they are tested at a very high scale. fully managed, as we discussed into the database traditional database challenges slide, that some of the tasks that are repetitive and requires some kind of experience or manual effort, all of those are covered as part of a basic feature set, and AWS provides those kind of features, and that's why they call it kind of a fully managed. We do not need to go inside the instances on which these databases are running. All of those things are basically underneath, hidden from us, and we just need to use the database as an endpoint. Secure and highly available. Security is something AWS takes very seriously, and all of these database are have built-in features to actually make them fully secure. And highly available is something that AWS promotes kind of generally, that you need to make sure that there are tools, there are configurations, there are options available that you can run a very highly available. uh, from the kind of a definition level, you are running your database in a multiple availability zone, so that in case of any failure, any kind of hardware failure, networking failure, or a regional zonal failure, then also your database is still available to use. Now in some cases you still need to do some kind of additional configuration that we'll see in the later slides, but it is possible to actually make your database highly available. Now, which are the different database services that AWS offers? Let's look at one by one. So the very first one is relational. As I mentioned the same few years back, the most popular widely database type is a relational database, that is SQL database. You can, I mean, in those time, if any use case, you will use the SQL database and you will try to actually kind of force fit any use case into that category of database. But then over the years, different genre of the database has come up for a variety of use cases. Everyone actually achieves something different, which is not possible or not efficient in a SQL based database. So when it comes to the relational database, AWS provides three services, starting with Amazon RDS, that is relational database service. Then comes Aurora, which is currently supporting MySQL and Postgres SQL. And then the Amazon Redshift, which is nothing but a warehouse, data warehouse service for a very large scale data processing. Next is a key value pair. Now Amazon DynamoDB is a service for the key value pair. This is extremely popular service, mainly because it is a serverless database. Remember, I mentioned that the serverless database is the one in which we are not incurring any cost if we keep it running. We only incur the cost when we use it, when we store the data or when we retrieve the data. Otherwise we are not incurring any per second cost. This is very popular among the serverless modern applications. There are many startups, there are a variety of use cases available where they use DynamoDB in a variety of ways. Third one is an in-memory database, otherwise known as a caching databases. The very popular open source database available for this is Redis and Memcached. Amazon Elasticache, which is a service that offers and supports both of these options under Elasticache for Memcached and Elasticache for Redis. Next is a document database, which is kind of a JSON document being saved and retrieved. Now the open source version of this database are MongoDB, or you can have the Couchbase as well. AWS supports the MongoDB under the Amazon Document DB. This is a production grade database with a MongoDB compatibility. I'll highly recommend, if you are running a MongoDB onto virtual machine, if you are moving to the cloud, I'll highly recommend using this service. We are using this in a kind of a production environment. It's an awesome service. White column database is the new entry. These are some of the new databases that AWS is onboarding. This is under the Apache Cassandra. Then we have the graph database. Now a few years back, if you were using graph database, I remember the Neo4j was the most popular one. AWS has its own alternative, that is Amazon Neptune. This is used for the use cases where in which you are creating the networks, you are creating the connections, and you want to actually identify the relationship based on that. The most recent are time series and ledger database, that is Amazon TimeStream. and Amazon QLDB, which is a blockchain based database for immutable data storage. TimeStream is a very recent one, which requires for a very modern application where you are storing the series of data like the ad clicks, the IoT data in the DevOps, industrial telemetry, and those kind of things. Let's create a relational database in our AWS environment and see how we can configure it and get it up and running in just a few minutes. So this is my AWS dashboard. I have selected one of the various region. Again, relational database runs in a regional format, so make sure that you have selected your region correctly. Now, if we look at the database here, these are the wide array of services that AWS offers, and we are only interested into database. So again, you will see some of the category here that we saw in the earlier slides. RDS, DynamoDB, Elasticache, Neptune, QLDB, DocumentDB, Keyspaces, Cassandra, and TimeStream. Now, let's start with an RDS. Okay, uh, on the side you will see a lot of options. I'll go through some of these options as we progress, but let's start by creating a simple database. By default it gives Aurora as an option. This is very popular. They are promoting Aurora because it has many advantages compared to the RDS instance. We'll not go into the detail of those, but let's create a database. Even if we go here, it will by default select Aurora, but in our case we are going to go with a normal RDS MySQL instance. This is again a fully managed. We do not need to go inside, kind of download and install anything. We just need to kind of select the right configuration. So I'm selecting the standard create. Easy create will actually hide some of the options, so I'll go with a standard create. Instead of Amazon Aurora, I'm going to select the MySQL. Now these 5 options are part of the RDS. RDS supports the MySQL, MariaDB, MS SQL, Oracle, and Postgres. Now if we go for Aurora, it actually supports only 2 options, MySQL and Postgres. So I'm actually selecting RDS, and in that I'm selecting MySQL. Now the first thing that we need to, as we discussed in one of the earlier slide, I need to first select that which database version that I want to go with. So I'm selecting the more recent stable MySQL 8, and then what kind of a use case that I have, whether I am setting this up for the production, whether it is a development testing, or whether it's a free tier. Now this selection only kind of changes what kind of a bare minimum configuration that we should go with and how much cost that it will incur. If we go with a free tier, it will give us very least configuration and a minimum kind of a setup, so that we can experiment. Dev test is only for the development and staging environment, where again the choices of configurations are very limited, and in production they have their own best practices. So we need high availability, we need the kind of an encryption, security, the backup, and all those things. Those are basically more fine grade into the production. So for our purpose, we are going with a free tier. We need to select the name of the database, that is MyDB. The credential, whether I want to actually provide my own password or I want to auto generate the password. In this case, I am going to auto generate a password for this case. Now as I mentioned, based on the selection of production, dev test, and free tier, there is an experimental just for the kind of a basic stuff. It will limit the choices of the option. So here we have many options. We have the standard classes, we have memory optimized classes, and we have the burstable classes, but I have the other two disabled because of the free tier access. Here also I have most of the other options are disabled. Now if I go back and select the dev test, it will give me slightly more options. These are the options configurations that I can select with, but I'm going to restricting myself with a simple free tier option. So this one selects the DB-T2 micro. Next comes the storage. What kind of a disk that I want to attach with it? General purpose provision IOPS, that if in case I want to kind of achieve any additional performance in terms of input output, then I can select that. Keep in mind that the IOPS are costly. Anything that you want besides the normal thing is going to add in your billing, that we'll see in a later slide. So we'll keep it to general purpose, and a magnetic is basically for a very low usage, infrequent usage, because magnetic will be very slow in terms of interaction with the database input output. So I'm selecting general purpose, and I need to select what exactly is the minimum storage. Now because we are actually creating for the experiment purpose, I am selecting the minimum storage requirement, that is 20 GB for this RDS MySQL, and it can go to up to 16 terabyte of data. Now here is the place where you start actually seeing the advantage of running the database in the cloud. It says enable storage auto scaling. That means if the storage reaches to a certain level, it will automatically add more storage. Now previously the DBA or the any person from your team will have to continuously monitor whether the disk is available for the database. If you are kind of a planning for the additional load, you also need to make sure that your database has enough capacity when it comes to the storage. Now with these kind of options, the continuous monitoring of the database just for the kind of a wider growth or a load is not required, and we can configure this kind of option. So here I'm configuring it that yes, I want to actually increase the storage when it reaches to the maximum threshold, and I'm going to add it to 1 GB additional, which it is not supporting, so I'm going to set it to 21 GB. So additional 21 GB will be added. This is another option which is limited because I have selected the free tier. Now this is for the high availability. High availability in AWS means that your application or your service is running kind of on multiple availability zone. Database instances are basically single availability. So if I want high availability and durability, I need to enable this feature, and this is not possible to do in a free tier. For that I need to actually select the dev test or the production environment, and keep in mind that this actually creates a secondary kind of instance, so it will have a cost impact as well. RDS, Aurora, those are VPC bound. These are not internet-based database. These databases are created inside availability zone. It requires a kind of a VPC to operate in, and the recommended practice is to use it inside the VPC only. So that's why you will see an option, even though you have an option to actually make it publicly accessible, but this is not a recommended option. You do not want your database to be accessed from over the internet from outside environment. Even if in the cases that you need to do, there are many other ways that you can achieve that, but I am going to keep it to kind of public access set to no. So only the VPC subnets which follows this particular set of security group will only be able to access it. There is no preference, so this can be created in any of the availability zone. There are additional options. Database port, I'm going to keep it to default one. 3306 is a MySQL default port. And next is an authentication. Now password authentication means that the database username and the password that it is going to auto generate, in our case, that will be supplied for the connection. And there is another one which is not very old, very recent addition as well, that is IAM database authentication. In this case it is kind of passwordless. If you are running your service in a EC2 or a Lambda or other place where actually it follows the AWS role, then you can actually give the database connection role, and then only it will be able to actually connect to the database. In our case, where I'm going to stick with the password based authentication. There are additional configurations. Name of the database, I will say my application. Default parameter group. Any of you who have worked with MySQL databases, every version of the database has their own parameter group. These are the large set of configurations through which you can actually configure your database, whether you want to enable the TLS based encryptions, whether you want to enable some slow query logs. many configuration options are available, and this is the way in which you can actually either provide your default parameter group, or you can actually customize and provide a custom parameter group as well. Backup, this is showing by default enable, one of the default features that the AWS databases offer, what kind of retention period that we want to keep. Now if you see, if you are running it outside the cloud environment, many of these tasks you need to do by hand, or you need to actually kind of configure some additional software or processes in place so that it can actually take the repetitive backup and it can remove the old backup as well. In our case, I'm actually selecting that I want the backup to be retained only for 7 days and not more than that. I can actually disable it as well, but that is not going to kind of add any benefit. Next is a backup window. Now backup is an extensive task. Database may actually go degrade in terms of performance, so you do not want to actually do the backup when your application is kind of used very actively. So this is the kind of activity that you want to do in a kind of low usage hours, or different particular time depending on the application's use case. In our case, I'm actually selecting no preference, but otherwise you can actually select the preference in terms of timing as well. Monitoring gives, this is an enhanced monitoring. Now this is an additional monitoring capability, but by default, even if you do not enable this, RDS will give you enough monitoring option that we'll see in a few minutes. Log exports, MySQL generates different kind of logs, and because we have selected MySQL on RDS, this is giving the option of whether we want to actually export the error log, general query log, or slow query log. All of these logs will be available in a CloudWatch log, so I'm going to enable it because I may require it down the line. Maintenance, some of the activity that AWS does by default. Remember, this is a fully managed, so we even though it is using some kind of an EC2 underneath, but we do not have access to that EC2 environment. So if we want to, if they identify some kind of a fix that they need to apply, some kind of a security patch or some kind of an upgrade, minor upgrade is required, whether we allow AWS to actually automatically to do those kind of a thing or not, that is something we can control from here. Maintenance window is for the maintenance task. They actually carry out some maintenance activity on each of these database, and we can, similar to the backup window, we can select whether we want to perform this maintenance task at particular point in time, or we can actually just offering it to be done at any point of time. Now as long as it is a development testing, it is fine, but in the production environment you want to actually set a proper maintenance window. Deletion protection is the same thing. This kind of allows to not accidentally delete this while this protection is enabled. Is mainly used because right now we are actually following this console to create the database, but in a production environment you most likely use some kind of an automation tool, Terraform or CloudFormation, to build the database. You do not want any of those tools to accidentally delete your main database. So this kind of protection is also available by default. Now the estimated monthly cost, the Amazon RDS free tier is available for 12 months. I have already exceeded that, so in my case it is not applicable, but if you have created a new AWS account, it is surely applicable to you. This is just related to the free tier, nothing that is interesting for us. Now I'm going to actually create the database. This process will take a few minutes, so I'll let it run while we explore some of the other options that we have. Now we have a query editor. This is only available for Aurora serverless. We are not going to talk about Aurora serverless in this session. Performance Insight is that additional option whether we want enhanced performance monitoring. So this will be visible if we have enabled that. In our case, we have not enabled, so it will not be visible. Snapshot is the kind of a full backup that we have taken. Whether it's a manual, we can take manual snapshot at any point. Whether it's an automated snapshot, shared snapshot will be there, and we can actually make public snapshot for the some of the data. We can see the list of the public snapshots available to use. Automated backups for my database is on, so that's why I will see it here, and the retained backup is also available. Reserve instances, if this is related to the cost and billing. If I know that I am going to run this database for 1 year or for few years, instead of paying the on demand, because right now we are paying on demand, instead of paying on demand I can actually reserve this particular instance with configuration, and that way I can actually reduce my overall billing. Proxy is another service of RDS that allows the connection pull less interaction with the database. This is mainly created for serverless applications where you do not want to actually create a new connection every time you want to interact with the database, and reduce some kind of a the timing and overhead on that. Subnet groups, parameter group, as I mentioned, a parameter group basically holds all the parameters as this is all the parameters that is supported for MySQL 8. Say these are the SSL parameters, whether SSL is enabled or not, the certification and stuff like that. Events, all the database events that we can actually capture from here, what happened, when happened, when it was done by whom, and like that. So let's see if our database is created or not. It is still creating. It usually takes a few minutes, somewhere around 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the size and the configuration. Okay, so it took few minutes, but now my database is up and running. I can see the status is available. It has some CPU percentage as well. And if you click on this, you'll see the number of options starting from the connectivity and security. This is the endpoint. This is my kind of a connection string. Port availability, because we gave no preference, it selected 2A, in which VPC it runs, the subnets, and the security group. Public accessibility is no. That means I cannot access this database from outside. There are no proxy that I have set, and this is the part. So monitoring comes by default. Now, because we enable the backup part, what it will do as a standard kind of a step is, as soon as it creates the database, it will take the first backup. So that is the reason why it has done something, that initial load, and it has a snapshot available of exactly the time when we created the database. So that's why it has logged the additional CPU utilization. Number of connections are 0. Free storage, we can see that. Preable memory, the write IOPS, read IOPS. So it gives a very basic monitoring here, but there are many other options also available in terms of monitoring. It's related to the credit, CPU credit, the network, in-out, total IOPS. So quite a monitoring feature by default available. Different events related to the database. This is the way we can actually understand what is going on inside our database. Full configuration. This shows the same thing that we selected when we started creating our database. And no tags we gave, so, and the maintenance and the backup window and other things. So this is for the RDS database. Now this is ready to use from inside our AWS VPC environment. Now let's look at the next database service, that is Amazon DynamoDB. I'm going to create a DynamoDB in the same region that I have RDS in. I'll keep my RDS running for a few minutes and then I'll delete it. So by default, I don't have any database in this particular region, so it shows the dashboard. A fast and flexible NoSQL database service for any scale. Now when it comes to the scale, this service can scale to even petabyte, and there are use cases, case studies available. You can go through the documentation to understand that. But DynamoDB is very versatile and used by variety of companies for variety of use cases. Now let's go and create a table. So in DynamoDB there is even though it's a database, but there is no concept of a database. You don't need to create a database per se, you just need to create a table. So we'll go and create a table. Let's say I want to give my table's name users. In DynamoDB, it's a key value pair. So the important key is the partition key, that is your primary key, similar to what we have in a relational SQL database. So we need to create a partition key, and all the data is basically saved in this partition segment, storage wise. So I will say that my partition key is based on the ID, which is string. I can optionally select a sort key. If I give a sort key, it will make it a composite key. So my overall key will become the partition key and sort key. And sort key is basically sorted inside that particular storage partition. I don't have any sort key. I'm not giving any sort key, and the default setting, instead of default, which will hide a lot of things, I'll go with the customized settings. So previously DynamoDB started as a provision. So DynamoDB has the calculation is based on the interactions that we do. So we can read from the database and we can write to the database. So these calculations are called the capacities. So we have the read capacity and we have the write capacity. So how much capacity that we want to allocate for our reading operation and for our writing operation, that we can individually configure and define. So in our case, I don't want to go with a provision because I don't know how frequently and how much I will read and how frequently and how much I will write. So there is another option called on demand. So this actually simplifies the overall interaction and billing. In this case, I don't know how frequently and how much I will use. So I would rather go with a on demand serverless approach, and then I will see that what exactly is my consumption pattern, and then over the period of time, if I want to go with a provision approach or not. So I'll go with on demand. Secondary index is similar to the indexes that we have in the database. If you want to actually index the data on a particular key, we are not creating that. And encryption at rest. By default, DynamoDB actually encrypts the data at rest. And in this case, we are not changing the configuration, but we do have an option to actually supply a different configuration encryption key. In our case, we let the DynamoDB manage the encryption on behalf of us. That it will create table. Compared to RDS, DynamoDB tables will be kind of a very easy and immediately available, because there is nothing that we need to do here. There is no underlying infrastructure that it has to set up like we did for the RDS. So now our table is basically ready to use. And the good part about the DynamoDB is that we can actually access it from outside as well. If you have the right kind of authorization, whether you use the Cognito or whether you use the other keys, you can actually access it from outside, although it is not recommended every time. But if you have a similar use case, you do not want to use it from inside the AWS environment, but outside, you can still use it from outside. So that's it for the DynamoDB. For DynamoDB, you have to follow their specific SDK to actually interact with the database tables. Now going back to our presentation, we saw number of database services that AWS offers of different kind for different use cases, and the reason why there are so many database offerings available now is because of the evolution of the application architecture and design itself. Now we design our application using the microservices, and we want to actually contain everything related to that microservice in itself. So every microservice is catering to a very specific kind of a requirement, and like we use the kind of a right underlying compute service and the storage service, we want to also use the right database. If my microservice is all about generating the recommendation, I want to use the graph database. If my microservice is all about to basically fetching the shopping cart, I will use the DynamoDB for that. If my microservice service is about kind of performing the payment calculations and saving the purchase order and other things, I will use the relational database for that kind of purpose. So that's why there are multiple options for each of the use case, and we should this depending on our use case and depending on the best fit, what kind of performance that we want to actually get, what kind of scale that we want to get, we should actually select the right database service for that. Next is a billing. Now I actually mentioned over the slides and in the demo that each database is built differently. There is some databases which has the minimum pay like RDS and Aurora, and some databases are like fully serverless like DynamoDB. We do not need to pay if we do not use it. Ultimately, at a very kind of a broad level, we are paying for storage. That is how much data that we are saving. We are paying for input output every time we actually make a query, either to fetch the data or either to save the data. We are paying for performance if we need that kind of a performance. So if we need additional caching, if we need more IOPS, we need to pay for that. We pay for the replica as well, because ultimately database service and the cloud provider is actually keeping a full replica of the database for high availability and durability. We pay for the data transfer that is kind of going in and coming out. Now it is not that we are paying in all the cases, but yes, in some cases we are actually paying for the data transfer as well. And depending on the purpose of the database and the use case, and you need to actually select the right database. If you are still experimenting, I will go with a serverless database, because that's the place where I'm actually paying very minimum. If you are writing a serious application and you will have users and you want to actually make sure that that all of the data is available, secure and backed up properly, and if your application's use case is more directed towards relational, you will go with that kind of database and configuration. So to summarize, we have seen a number of things. Database that is outside the cloud environment, database on the cloud, what kind of a basic features that they provide, different AWS database services for different use cases, how we actually understand and how we select the right database, that actually depends on the case by case, but at least the bare minimum understanding of the different database service has to be there. DynamoDB nearly fits a lot of use cases. So if I'm starting up, I'm experimenting, or if my application is serverless or microservice based, I will obviously find a way that if this use case or this particular requirement fits into the DynamoDB or not before I select any of the other heavy database. Understand the security and compliance requirement. This follows the shared responsibility model of AWS. There are some things which AWS and the selected database service will do for you, but there are few configurations which the end user will have to actually maintain. Similar to in the RDS, we saw that there is an option to actually make the database publicly accessible. Now whether I choose it and whether I protect it or not, that is entirely up to me. In that case, AWS will not be able to actually do much if I actually share my database kind of a connection and credential to anyone outside. If you are experimenting, consider the least management and least cost. This is because you are getting away from all those maintenance and configurations and day-to-day activity, and at the same time keeping your cost minimum. And watch your budget. Put the billing alerts, put the budget, and make sure that you are well within that range, what you are actually expecting to pay, and then evaluate that depending on how your application grow. So that's it from this session, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you.